I've lived my whole life in a quiet little town in northern Oregon. It's small and peaceful, with not much happening most of the time. I worked at one of the two chicken go spots in town. If you haven't heard of it, it's kind of like KFC or Church's Chicken. But honestly, the food's nothing to brag about. We mostly served fried chicken, biscuits, and sides like coleslaw and mac and cheese. The pay was awful, but I stayed there for almost 2 years because I genuinely liked my co-workers and enjoyed the good moments we had with customers. About 2 weeks ago, something strange started happening. We had a few regulars who showed up every day or the same day every week, always ordering the same thing. Most of them just came to chat and get out of the house. While a lot of these conversations were great, we did have some weird or uncomfortable moments too, often from people clearly on something or struggling mentally. Usually, if they got too creepy, we'd warn them that the police would be called, and they'd leave or calm down. But then came the guy we started calling the man in the silver hoodie. He was different. I had never seen him during my shifts, but the other cashiers said he'd been coming in for a while, sometimes every day. Apparently, he kept asking if I was working, and even called the store multiple times to find out when I'd be there. He'd get upset whenever they told him I wasn't around. It was weird, but since I hadn't dealt with him directly, I didn't think too much of it. Then one day, he started hanging around outside the store, just standing there for hours, puffing something we assumed was a cigarette. Later, we found out he'd been smoking weed right outside. My manager, Claire, went out to talk to him. He claimed it helped him deal with his PTSD and depression. She told him if he had to do it, to go behind the building near the dumpsters and clean up after himself. He grumbled, but agreed. A few minutes later, he came inside, pulled out his phone, and pointed it out the window like he was recording or snapping pictures. I let Claire know, and by the time we went to check, he had already left. It gave me a really uneasy feeling. That night, around 9:30, I was in the back washing dishes while Claire did the nightly closing routine. My boyfriend was outside waiting in his truck to pick me up when we closed at 10. Suddenly, I heard the door open. Since I was the only one who could run the register, I wiped my hands and went up front. There he was, the guy in the silver hoodie. He had gray jeans with a chain hanging off them and worn-out red sneakers. Under his hoodie, he had a black and white striped polo and a necklace with a little cross. He wore a knit beanie and had one earbud in, plus a sparkly earring. His eyes were a sharp green, and he had thick lashes. Honestly, up close, he looked completely different than I had imagined. Trying to keep things normal, I smiled and greeted him. "Hi there. Welcome to Chicken Go. What can I get you?" Instead of answering, he just stood there staring at me with a wide grin. Then he stepped closer and slid his hand into his pocket. My stomach dropped. I backed up slightly, bracing myself, thinking he might have a weapon. But instead, in a deep, rough voice, he said, "You're even more beautiful up close. I've been waiting to see you like this for so long." He chuckled, pulled a small envelope out of his jacket, and placed it on the counter. Without another word, he gave me one last creepy look, laughed again, and walked out the door. As soon as he left, I dropped to the floor crying. My boss rushed over to help, and I pointed to the envelope, unable to speak. She opened it and dumped the contents onto the counter. My blood ran cold. Inside were personal items that had disappeared from my apartment over the past couple weeks. A ring with a blue stone, a butterfly-shaped necklace, a pair of gray underwear, and a black hairband. There was also my lip gloss and chapstick that I hadn't seen in days. But the worst part was a note. It read, "Your pillow smells like the sea. Your blanket smells like coconut. Did you know you talk in your sleep?" Claire immediately ran outside and got my boyfriend, who held me while I cried in the car. That night, we stayed at my mom's place. The next day, my boyfriend packed some clothes and essentials from our apartment, and we stayed with a friend until we found a new place. I quit my job right away and started working with my mom in a nearby town. Things seemed fine until we went back to get our furniture. What we found was horrifying. Dishes were smashed, couch cushions were ripped open, stuffing thrown everywhere. The words "I miss your skin" were written again and again on our walls. We left everything except an old air mattress and returned the keys. After that, we got 3 dogs for protection. Every time they bark, I freeze, thinking it might be him. We keep all our blinds closed, our bed on the floor, and I never go anywhere alone. I haven't stepped foot near Chicken Go since that night. Just 2 days ago, we found out he was arrested for trying to break into Chicken Go at 4 a.m. He admitted to breaking into our old place and stealing my things. Police found more of my missing stuff at his place. Underwear, a dress, my old phone filled with pictures of me, sleeping, showering, and doing dishes. He had been watching us for weeks. Honestly, I don't think I'll ever fully feel safe again. I was between places, figuring out my next move, when a relative from another country offered me a place to stay for a bit. At first, I wasn't sure, it felt awkward, but I also didn't want to overstay with the person I was crashing with. So after some thought, I agreed to go and stay with this cousin and his fiancée. It was a long flight, and I knew going back early wouldn't be cheap or easy, but I figured a break would do me good. The weather there was warm and calming, and I really needed to clear my mind after a bad breakup. Within days, my cousin, let's call him Daniel, started venting about his relationship. He told me he felt stuck, like he couldn't even enjoy a night out because his partner always stayed home. He also said he was tired of always footing the bills, and that it had become an unspoken rule. But since I was visiting, he had an excuse to go out more, and we did have fun. I met some locals and had a nice evening. The next morning, Daniel looked downcast. He said his fiancée was mad, had stormed off, and taken his car because we had gone drinking. Then he added something strange. He said I had walked to the bathroom the night before with no clothes on. That wasn't true. I don't even sleep that way, and I was fully dressed when I got up. I thought it was just a weird joke, but slowly things started to feel off. I wasn't allowed to go out alone. I was told taxis didn't exist in the area, and I needed to be driven everywhere. Later I found out that wasn't true. The beach, which I was told was 10 minutes away, was actually a long, remote walk. They also didn't tell me there was a store right next door. I found that out myself. Daniel's behavior got more uncomfortable. He kept staring at my chest, even though I wore modest clothes. And he wouldn't stop talking about his relationship problems, which made things awkward around his fiancée. One day, I was making coffee when he asked me to make him one too, even though he'd told me before that he hated coffee. I turned around and saw him standing there in just a towel. I had this awful gut feeling. Then it happened. He let the towel drop on purpose and just stood there. I was frozen for a second, then I snapped and yelled, "What the hell are you doing?" He played dumb and said he didn't realize. I was furious. It brought up deep, painful memories because I grew up around his father, who was emotionally abusive. I thought Daniel was different, but clearly I was wrong. Things got creepier. He showed me the nearby store, and there I met a kind woman who invited me to town to check out the nightlife. I accepted and we went out, but I felt overwhelmed and something told me not to drink. I went back early, around 9:30 p.m., and headed straight to my room. Later that night, I woke up to use the bathroom and saw my bra and underwear laid out on the living room floor. They had clearly been taken from my suitcase. I panicked, grabbed them, and went back to my room. Not long after, Daniel knocked on my door whispering, "Are you back?" When I answered, he walked in, laid on the bed in boxers, and said he had thrown his fiancée out and we could finally be alone. I jumped up and left the room. He followed, questioning why I didn't let him know I was home. I said I'd messaged, but no one replied. He seemed annoyed I hadn't been drinking, and tried to convince me to have a drink then. I agreed just to avoid more drama. About 2 hours later, his fiancée returned, sulking on the doorstep. When I checked on her, she completely ignored me. The next morning, I still felt groggy from the whiskey, and his fiancée was cold and distant again. I lost my temper and told her straight up that I wouldn't put up with her attitude, and that being ungrateful while someone pays for everything isn't right. I don't think she really got it, but things calmed down after that. They asked me to stay longer, but I needed to register a new address due to visa rules. So I moved into a hotel. That first night, I stood on the balcony and got this weird feeling of being watched. I turned off the lights and saw someone moving in the bushes. I thought I was imagining things until I saw Daniel casually walking away from below my balcony like nothing happened. He had been watching me. That was the final straw. I cut contact, stayed quiet, and waited for my flight home. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, another family member sent me screenshots of Daniel making wild accusations, saying I ruined his relationship, that his fiancée was scared of me, and even claiming I'd been arrested. None of it was true. I was shaking with rage, but kept pretending I didn't know until I was safely home. Luckily, I spent my remaining days meeting good people and avoided Daniel. When I was packing to leave, I discovered he had conveniently lost one of my expensive shoes. Good thing I had backups. Even after I returned, the lies continued, but no one believed them. My family saw through it. I was thankful I trusted my instincts and stayed strong. If I were younger, I might have blamed myself or brushed it off. Now, these people are completely out of my life. And while this isn't the only messed up situation I've dealt with, it taught me a valuable lesson. To anyone listening, especially women, please trust your gut. People can seem kind and familiar, but still have harmful intentions. Stay sharp and take care of yourself. After finishing college in Arizona, my biggest goal was to leave. So, I started planning a big move to the West Coast to start fresh. I was 23, full of dreams, and ready for change. Everything was lined up perfectly. I quit my job, and a close friend offered to take over my rental. I'd been living alone in a small duplex ever since my old roommate moved out, and my friend simply moved into the second room while I packed. One night, around 10 p.m., we were watching a movie when someone knocked on the door. My friend opened it and came back with a takeout bag from a local sub shop. I thought maybe he had ordered food, but he assumed I had. We checked the receipt, and it had my full name and the correct address, but the phone number used wasn't mine. I called the number out of curiosity. Someone picked up, but didn't say a word. Just quiet background noise and breathing. When I looked the number up, it seemed to be from some calling app. I told myself it was probably just a mistake. But then, a few nights later, it happened again. Another knock. Another delivery. My friend answered again, telling the driver nobody here had ordered anything. The delivery person said the man, who called, just picked the first meal on the specials list. Same phone number again. I called. Someone answered. Still no talking. The silence was starting to feel more intentional. Deliveries kept coming every few days. My move got delayed for other reasons, but now I was really starting to feel uneasy. Why was someone doing this? Then one night, after yet another delivery, I called the number while my friend sat beside me. This time someone spoke. A male voice, clear as day, said, "She still lives there," and then hung up. I didn't recognize the voice, but that moment changed everything. I stopped calling. My friend tried instead, but no one ever said a word again. Eventually, the food deliveries slowed down, but the harassment didn't stop. That number started calling me dozens of times a day, sometimes 30 times in a row, and occasionally my friend got calls too. Every time we answered, they'd hang up, only to call again a few seconds later. Then came the friend requests online. Strangers claiming we had met at parties I hadn't even attended. Creepy messages saying they remembered my outfit or my laugh. The scariest part, someone started throwing eggs at our house. That's when I realized this wasn't random. This person was nearby. They knew where I lived. Somehow, they even knew I hadn't moved out yet. I became a shut-in, barely stepping outside. I was scared every time I opened a curtain. When I finally moved, I blocked the number and changed everything I could. My friend decided not to stay in the place either, which I totally understood. I was so thankful he stayed with me those last couple of months. It's been 8 years. I never found out who was behind it. Some old classmates or co-workers knew I was moving, but none of them seemed like the type to do this. and I still don't recognize the voice I heard that one time. To this day, I won't open the door if I'm not expecting someone. I won't pick up a call from an unknown number. Even getting delivery makes me nervous now. I go to a public college in Oregon that's part of a big university system. Some of the campuses, like the ones in Portland or Eugene, are really large and well known. They host these big event days each year where new students visit, but really, it's just an excuse for wild campus-wide parties. One of the most famous ones is called River Bash in Eugene. Even though my college is smaller and quieter, it's not unusual for students to travel to the bigger schools for these events. I had never gone before. Partying wasn't really my thing. But since it was my last year in college, I figured why not go at least once. So me and 4 friends, Kyle, Jamal, Chris, and Leo, packed into Kyle's car and drove down to Eugene the Friday before the big day. We're all tall guys, so the ride was tight and kind of uncomfortable, but we had fun talking and listening to music. When we got to the college town, finding parking was a nightmare. Just as we were about to give up, Kyle managed to talk a local student into letting us use her reserved spot. No clue how he pulled that off. We planned to stay at Kyle's sister's apartment. She goes to the university and had agreed to let us crash on her floor for the weekend. Honestly, during River Bash, even floor space is like gold. She and her roommates were super welcoming, and we ended up hanging out with them that first night, even though the real party wasn't until the next day. Now, there's one guy you need to know about, Zane. He's one of Kyle's old acquaintances, but no one in our group really liked him. Zane's the kind of person who always tries too hard to fit in, talks way too much about himself, and makes everything about him. He's caused some issues in the past, so we all kept our distance. We never invited him to come along. But as we were walking back from buying drinks that night, we saw him, just standing on the sidewalk with his hands in his pockets, like he'd been waiting for us. No one said anything, and he just started walking with us, like it was no big deal. The first thing he said was, "Why do you guys look surprised to see me?" We were shocked, but didn't say much. When we got back to the apartment, Zane asked to use the bathroom. Kyle reluctantly said yes, and Zane sprinted ahead, knocked on the door, and told Kyle's sister, "I'm staying here." He walked right in before she could even respond. She didn't know who he was and assumed he was part of our group. Kyle was furious when he realized Zane had lied to his sister. He told him straight up to leave, and Zane didn't take it well. He stood outside the door for nearly 20 minutes, begging to be let back in. Kyle wasn't playing around, though, and eventually Zane walked away. Later that night, we found out that Zane had somehow been tracking Kyle's phone location, which explained how he found us. Pretty creepy, right? The next day, River Bash was amazing. The weather was perfect, and the whole area was buzzing with energy. Later that afternoon, 5 more of our friends joined us at the apartment. When we told them about Zane, one of them, Josh, checked his phone and realized he still had Zane's location saved. What we saw chilled us, his location that was practically right on top of us. As soon as Josh mentioned it, the dot started moving fast, like Zane had been watching us from a parked car and sped off. We were all unsettled, but tried to laugh it off and went back to enjoying the day. That night, everyone crashed after partying. Sometime past midnight, I woke up to the sound of breaking glass. I sat up, heart racing. Nobody else woke up. Everyone had passed out from the night before. I grabbed an empty bottle as a weapon and crept toward the noise. In the living room, I saw the sliding glass door to the balcony had been shattered. A big rock lay in the middle of the room, surrounded by broken glass. And then, something even more terrifying happened. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the handle of a closet door slowly move. Someone was inside. I was just about to open it when I stopped myself. Instead, I rushed back to wake Kyle up. Together, we returned to the living room, but by then, The closet door was wide open, and no one was inside. Kyle looked inside and found something that made our blood run cold, a large kitchen knife. Zane had been hiding in that closet with a weapon. If I had opened the door alone, he could have seriously hurt me. We woke everyone up and searched the entire apartment. Zane was gone. We called the police, filed a report, and explained everything. The cops said property damage happens a lot during River Bash, but there wasn't much they could do. Before we left the next morning, Kyle typed out a long message to Zane, telling him off and making it clear he was never welcome in our lives again. But the message didn't go through. Zane had already blocked us. We checked our phones. All of us were blocked. It was like he vanished. We haven't heard from him since. I still think about how close I came to real danger that night. Zane never seemed violent before, which makes it even scarier. He knows where most of us live, and even now, I sometimes wonder if he's going to show up again. This happened a long time ago, but I still remember nearly every detail like it was yesterday. It was late April 1996. I had just finished basic training and was newly stationed at an air base in San Angelo, Texas, working as a communications specialist. Being in Texas felt like a fresh start. I was from Mississippi, and part of the reason I enlisted in the first place was to get as far away from home as I could. I was 24 years old at the time, finally carving out a space of my own. My closest friends on base were a guy named Sebus and a girl named Kay. We were inseparable, the kind of friends who didn't need to plan anything to end up spending all day together. One warm weekend in early April, Sebus suggested a spontaneous road trip to Austin just to shake off the monotony of base life. Kay offered to drive. We packed up her SUV and hit the road that same afternoon. About an hour into the trip, we were on a mostly empty stretch of highway when Sebus spoke up. "Did you guys see that SUV pull off the shoulder and start following us?" I looked back. A dark-colored Tahoe, or something similar, was trailing us steadily. I hadn't noticed it before, but it didn't strike me as especially strange at first. Then Kay changed lanes just to test a theory, and the Tahoe followed. She did it again, and again the SUV mirrored her move. A minute later, it all seemed to make sense when the vehicle lit up with flashing lights. An undercover cop. Kay pulled over, and the Tahoe pulled in behind us. As the guy stepped out, I felt my instincts kick in, the ones drilled into me during training. Something was off. He wasn't dressed like any officer I'd ever seen. All black tactical gear, no visible badge or name tag. The only insignia was a patch on his sleeve that I couldn't even read. He didn't walk up to the window like normal cops do either. Instead, he stood behind the SUV for a while, scanning us, peering through the windows like he was sizing up what we had in the car. He looked at our bumper stickers, stared at the license plate, even crouched a bit to see under the vehicle. Sebus and Kay noticed it too. Finally, Sebus rolled down his window and asked, "Is there a problem?" That's when the guy snapped out of it and strode quickly up to Kay's window, asking for her license and registration. She handed it over hesitantly. He returned to the Tahoe and stayed there for what felt like forever. We whispered to each other the entire time. "This doesn't feel right. Why is he taking so long? That guy is not a cop." Then the driver stepped out again, but this time, 2 other men got out with him. My heart rate shot up. I sat perfectly still and started doing the focused breathing techniques we were taught in basic. Stay alert. Stay calm. The first guy walked back to Kay's window. He didn't return the ID right away. Instead, he looked at the military bumper sticker on her car and asked, "Was your dad in the army or something?" Kay laughed nervously. "No, that's mine. I'm the one in the military." Then she gestured towards Sebus and me. "Them too." The air changed immediately. The man froze. I watched as he looked over his shoulder at the other two men, then back at Kay. Silence. Then, just like that, he handed her license back and muttered, "I'll let you off with a warning. Drive slower." He turned around and walked straight back to the Tahoe. The other two followed. Before Kay could even put the key in the ignition, the SUV sped off down the highway. We just sat there in shock. Sebas couldn't stop repeating, "They weren't real cops." If we hadn't been military. We drove on to Austin, still shaken but trying to put it behind us. The weekend turned out to be a good one, filled with food, music, and some much-needed laughter. By the time we returned to base, the strange stop had faded to the back of our minds. But a week later, it all came flooding back. Sebas and I were in the rec room watching the local news when a story came on that froze me in place. A man and woman had been found dead in a ditch along a stretch of highway outside San Angelo. They'd been robbed and murdered, and their car, a black Tahoe, had been abandoned nearby. The police said it had been reported stolen months earlier in a different state. Sebas and I looked at each other without saying a word. Then we got up and went to find Kay. The three of us went straight to the authorities and told them everything. Part of me felt awful for not reporting it sooner, but we couldn't have known. To this day, I still think about that bumper sticker. That tiny piece of vinyl may have saved our lives. If not for that, I'm almost certain we would have ended up in that ditch. I've always been a really private person. That's part of the reason I've waited this long to share what happened. I can't think of many worse things than having this story traced back to me. But lately I've been thinking, it would be a shame to leave this earth without ever telling it. So here goes. I'm stepping way out of my comfort zone to put this out there. It was about 10 years ago. I was on a solo road trip from West Patterson, New Jersey, headed to Fort Worth, Texas to visit my parents. I hadn't seen them in a while, and it felt like the trip was long overdue. Somewhere along the way, maybe in Arkansas or the edge of Oklahoma, I can't say for sure, my car started acting up. I ignored it as long as I could, but eventually I had no choice but to pull over. I was surrounded by nothing but trees, an open field, and a long, empty road behind me. I popped the hood and stood there pretending I had any clue what I was doing. I didn't. I was mostly stalling, trying not to admit to myself that I was completely helpless. I figured I'd fake it for a while and then cave and call AAA, except I didn't have AAA. That part still annoys me. A few minutes later, I heard a vehicle pulling up behind me. It was a plain white pickup. No front plate, or at least not one I could see. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a man. Mid-30s maybe. Curly hair, a long unkempt beard. He looked like someone who worked with his hands. The weirdest part, he kind of looked like me. Same height, build, hair color, just rougher around the edges. He approached slowly, glancing at my car like it was a puzzle he was about to solve. Before I could say a word, he was already leaning over the engine, poking around like he knew what he was doing. He said he was a mechanic. I believed him. He moved with purpose, like someone who had done this 100 times. After a couple of minutes, he stepped back and said he needed a compression tester, something he claimed was essential to get the car started. He said his friend, also a mechanic, could bring one. Then he reached for his phone to call him. That's when things took a turn. He looked at his screen, paused for a few seconds, then said it was dead. Asked to borrow mine. I handed it over without thinking twice. The moment the phone was in his hand, he reached into his jacket with the other and pulled out a gun. Just like that, everything changed. He told me to sit on the side of the road and not do anything stupid. His voice was flat, practiced. He rifled through my pockets, took my wallet, my backpack, and even made me give him my phone password. Then he got in his truck and drove off. I had just been robbed on the side of a road in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, I'm calm telling it now, but back then, I was furious. Absolutely livid. But unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. Someone eventually did stop and help me. Got my car running, gave me directions to Fort Worth, and I made it that same night. Visiting my parents actually turned out to be a much needed reset. But then 6 months later, things started to unravel. I got a letter from a bank I'd never heard of thanking me for opening a line of credit. Then another letter, this one from Best Buy, confirming that I'd already spent over $1,000 on a new card. The charges were from a town in Tennessee. That's when it hit me. My Social Security card had been in my wallet when I was robbed. The guy didn't just rob me. He became me. What followed was a nightmare. Identity theft in full swing. Cards opened in my name, charges piling up, fraudulent medical records showing up on my health insurance. I filed every report, froze every account, followed every guideline. Still, it wasn't enough. The fraud kept escalating. Eventually, I decided to fight back. I turned my life upside down and made it my mission to track him down. I scanned credit reports, forums, even Craigslist. One night, I spotted a post selling power tools, tools that matched charges made on one of those fraudulent cards. I played it cool, reached out, pretended to be interested. We set up a time and place to meet. I didn't go. I called the Jackson, Tennessee police instead and gave them everything. To their credit, they listened. They took it seriously. The next day, the guy showed up in a red pickup. The moment he spotted patrol cars, he tried to bolt. He crashed into a ditch not far from the lot. It wasn't serious, but it was enough to bring him in. Once they brought up the Best Buy items, he cracked. Claimed a friend, gave him the stuff. Eventually, he gave up that friend's name, and that led to all of them. Turns out, it wasn't just one guy. There were 3 of them, all working together. And I wasn't their only victim. They'd been targeting travelers up and down southern interstates for a while. All 3 were arrested, charged, convicted. I won't say much more than that, but I will say this: justice was served.